Yo, what's up, guys? Twitter here for Trail Game Vlogs. This is actually and I might start doing these consistently. This is pretty much a manga chapter review from Musume, chapter 38, 38, 38, 38, 38. All right, anyways. I'm probably going to start doing these because Musume chapters come out like once a month. For those who don't know, Musume is a monthly series, and they're pretty easy to do and I like doing them. I don't know how consistently, but I mean, granted, it's once a month, so at most you'll get like 12 a year. And I figured I'd do the newest chapter, which I've technically already written a review about on the website, but like the actual translation for the damn chapter came out, so I said, well, let's not talk about it. Let's go ahead and talk about it, because for one, this is the so spoilers, obviously. This is the first chapter we've gotten in like almost 2 months, and then on top of that, it's the first Lala focused chapter, like completely about Lala, which is we've been missing that. I mean, she was introduced like what 14 chapters ago, and this is her first real chapter. Jesus Christ. Anywho's, let's talk about the chapter. So the premise of the chapter is pretty much after the whole Meryl's mother incident, Kurusu's in the hospital because he's perfectly fine, and the doctors don't understand how he could be perfectly fine, considering the situation he went through. This is where we find out that Lala has come to visit him because, for A, they were all worried, but B, the rest of the girls can't be trusted for shit because, well, they're all giant monster girls, and we can't have that many ridiculous antics going on in the hospital. So Lala's there as a representative. This chapter is nothing but Lala fan service. Fuck you, phone. This chapter is nothing but Lala fan service without actual fan service. This is actually, I think this might be the only chapter in the entire series so far that doesn't have fan service in it, because there's like no booty shots, there's no titty shots, there's no stripping, none of that shit. Actually, this is probably one of the heavier themed chapters of Monster Musume, or actually, it probably is the most heaviest theme because it's dealing with the concept of death and Lala's inner confliction about saving a child's life, because technically as a Grim Reaper, her job is just to guide the souls of the dead back to the afterlife, which, souls are one thing, but, pretty much becoming, not a god, but pretty much cheating death is something entirely different. So we find out that Lala's awkward with children. Lala doesn't like being a chinibio in front of strangers, which is adorable. And apparently now every time she wants to have like some real life shit conversation with Kurusu, she's gonna knock him out, which is not really shocking. And Lala's just how Lala handles her. Lala is very interesting to me, and that's why she's probably, if not my favorite, like my second favorite girl, because of how interesting she is. I like the way she acts. I like her. I like the setup for her character. Although there's probably one caveat in this chapter I know a few people are mad at, and it's understandable why, but shit kind of happens. So, anywho's, some other kids come in there and visit. She gets awkward around the kids. She loses her head. A girl who was kind of hiding in the corner finds her head and makes quick friends with Lala because she isn't afraid of Grim Reapers and girls who lose their heads. We come to find out later she sneaks back in with these creepy looking kitty cat plushies, which, if anything, remind me of the dolls that from Camphor, that show. They remind me of the dolls because they have like bleeding eyes and it looks like their guts are being ripped out, because that's how the dolls look like in Camphor. Uh, they look like those kind of dolls, and she's bringing it to the girl as a present. The girl's name is Yuhi, by the way. This is where she finds out from Kurusu that Yuhi has some type of terminal disease and doesn't have that much left longer to live, which explains why she didn't have any problem hanging out with a fucking Grim Reaper and why she was asking questions about death. And then this is where the inner conflict comes in, because Lala's conflicted. She's like, well, I mean, her soul will be fine, and I know that for a fact because she's a Grim Reaper. That's how she knows. But she's conflicted about her dying so young and doesn't want her to die so young, even though she does mention something to the effect of there will be ramifications if she were to do this, or something along the lines of like she shouldn't do this, but she's conflicted. And so because for some reason she gets embarrassed, which I didn't understand. In retrospect, the scene doesn't make sense because it's the middle of the night and she got embarrassed asking Kurusu for advice. So what she does is knocks him out. This is also where we learn that Lala's the one that saved him at the end of the marrow stuff from last chapter. But it also reveals probably the biggest problem with this chapter. He says how apparently he does not remember their conversations in the land in the River Styx land, because I'm assuming because it's River Styx land. I mean, all he says is that he doesn't ever seem to remember shit when after he comes here, which sucks because it essentially means that now granted in this chapter is not as offensive because let's be honest, we've only seen this place twice. We saw it in chapter 30 and we saw it in chapter 38. And even here, the only thing he does in this entire chapter is give her advice. That's about it. Like, that's all he does in this. And like, there is no romantic. That's probably my other thing. There's no like romantic connection. But then again, it's a harem, so it's more focused on like Lala gets the development, and it's not like Kurusu completely forgets. He just forgets when he's not there. So it's not. And as I say, it's not like throughout the chapter there was nothing to tell you that Lala and Kurusu grew closer. But there is something that kind of underlines that maybe Lala likes Kurusu a little bit more now. But essentially, she's telling him how she's conflicted and she doesn't know what to do. And of course, being Bae, he gives the most perfect advice. He says, look, first off, you're afraid about meddling in her lives, but you've already done that. The moment you met her, you did that. So you can fuck all that noise. And on top of that, the most important thing is to make sure it's natural for her to want to help someone, regardless if she's a Grim Reaper or not. That's just a personality trait. You want to help people that you care about, or you want to care about, and that's why she cared so much. Because you actually get to see Lala. You get to see Lala get embarrassed, be awkward, cry, blush, smile. Like she goes through all range of emotions in this chapter, and I fucking love it. Lala's just straight adorable to me. But essentially, Kurusu gives her the advice that she needs to make a decision, and her decision, we find out at the end of this chapter, is to turn Yuhi, the girl, dying girl, into a zombie. How does she do this? Well, apparently it's kind of revealed that in the middle of the night, I guess she went and stole one of Zambina's teeth, and then we don't know what she did with it, but she used the tooth in some way, shape, or form and turned Yuhi into a zombie. Although, and as I said, this is why I said the advice thing isn't that big of a. This chapter is the whole, him forgetting shit when he's not in that world doesn't mean too much because he pieces what she ends up doing anyway. It's like, oh, why? Because she's holding pliers behind her hand while showing Zambina the tooth that was in her. It's like, and Curtis looks at, fuck you, phone. What is with me getting emails at like 12 o'clock in the morning? Fuck you, phone. And she looks at the pliers in her hand and it's like, Lala, you didn't. And then, of course, she did, but Miss Smith doesn't know that, and Zambina and them don't know that. And the end of the chapter is pretty much the Mon Squad being on house arrest, even though most people have already surmised that that'll probably end up at Darling's house. Now, I'm interested. This is a cool setup if they take it as an arc, which I'm kind of curious to see if they're going to, because I already know the next chapter is going to be Zambina focused, if anything else. But I'm curious if they're going to have Zambina deal with the repercussions of it, and we kind of get the more because it's an interesting concept that this show does acknowledge the fact that if a zombie bites you, you turn into a zombie. Like this show follows like Walking Dead logic, I guess you could say, that you turn into a zombie if you were bitten. But apparently your tooth doesn't have to be connected. If it's a zombie tooth, you automatically turn into a zombie. Apparently. We don't, as I said, we never get to see. We get to see her hold the tooth in front of Yuhi, but we never get to see what she does with the tooth with Yuhi to turn her into a zombie. But we know that she's a zombie now. This also brings up a lot of legal things because remember we had these interspecies laws. But what do you do about a situation where a human turns into a monster? Like, how does that work? And then also it brings up the question: well, now that she's a zombie, does that mean she can't age? There's a lot of shit going on in this chapter. They made it inherently interesting while also giving me a ridiculous amount of cuteness with Lala. And, oh my god, so much cuteness with Lala. Waifu status, oh my god. I kind of hope the next chapter is still a mixture of Lala stuff because because when she talks about how she wants the Yuhi to like experience life and to fall in love, The image reference we get to see is like Kurusu and the rest of the girls, even though she doesn't put herself in her own images. Apparently, Lala just refuses to be relevant even in her own chapter in some instances. It brings up an interesting concept that I'm curious if this chapter will lead into a Lala themed arc. And the one thing I want to see Lala do more is interact with the girls more. That's the one thing she doesn't do. I think the only interactions I've seen her have is when she was introduced, when she's at the inn after Kurusu almost freezes to death, and Poppy is the only character to notice her existence. It happens again during the Mero, Sue, and Lala chapter. Once again, Mero just acknowledges her existence, and Sue trolls the shit out of her. And then this chapter, like Lala has like the lead. This chapter shows that she cares about people at the house, but the problem is that you barely see her interact with them, so it's weird. I'm confused about like, and I've always been curious why he keeps using Lala this way, where apparently he has no problem telling serious stories using Lala. But why is it that Lala isn't a focus, and why isn't she more consistently in the manga? If you've noticed, Lala, and I've mentioned this before, Lala disappears like every 3 or 4 chapters. Ever since she was introduced, she shows up consistently maybe for 1 or 2 chapters, and is usually as a minor role, and then she disappears for a few chapters, comes back, disappears, comes back, disappears, comes back, disappears, which is different from any of the other girls, because the other girls, even if they don't like, even if they're not the focus of the chapter, they still show the fuck up in the chapter. Lala, on the other hand, doesn't do that, and then you're just confused about like, well, what the fuck are we going for here? Because now I don't get it. Like, I don't get what you're trying to do. So the chapter's good. I could just see people bitching about the potential bullshit that can happen with Kurusu doesn't remember certain things. He doesn't remember anything that happens in River Styx, which means that could lead to an eventual confession that he won't remember. Although it could set up for some interesting gags. That's the one thing I've noticed is that they haven't really had Kurusu. A lot of people are already wondering why bring up the Chinibyo stuff like at the end of her introduction chapter if you're not going to use that later. So a lot of people are kind of thinking that there will be a Chunibyo based chapter where Lala will get to see his, dark past and shit. The anime even took the eye catcher forward and actually ran with it, which makes me really want a chapter like that now because I kind of want a bonding chapter for them. This chapter is fine for Lala development, which is what we needed. We needed Lala development, but let's be real, the core of it all, I still want to see Kurusu and Lala do some stupid, goofy shit. And why? Because I'm a fucking nerd. And the Chunibyo shit is funny depending on the anime. Here, Lala's fucking hilarious. And she's fucking adorable. So if we ever get that season 2, which probably won't come until like another year or so, God, there will be so many gifts based on scenes for this show, this chapter animated. I don't even fucking care. But what were your thoughts? Please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. This has been the vlog again from your boy Terrell. Vlogs of game from your boy Terrell, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.